Hey guys, so today I want to show you how you can get 4 voices using just your Mo grandmother in the MidiVolts desktop. So I've had a lot of people in the past ask me if it's possible to get a 4th voice using your filter as an oscillator. And I would usually just tell them no, it's not possible because the cutoff input isn't quite calibrated to the 1 volt per octave standard, so it would just sound super out of tune and not really useful. However, about a year ago, I found a workaround for this solution, and that's kind of what I want to show you guys today. I will say that you can really only achieve 1 sound by doing this, but nonetheless, it's kind of a fun little lesson in Eurorack, and I'm curious to see who else can get it working on their system. So this is what it sounds like. Okay, so I think I'm going to start from the very beginning just to be as clear as I possibly can, just because there's a lot of steps and it's kind of confusing. So just in general, right now I have local mode on, so normal operation, 8 foot on oscillators 1 and 2. For now I just have sawtooth on both, oscillator 1 and 2 up in the mixer section, cut up wide open, keyboard tracking should be in the middle, so that's really important. And yeah, we won't even use the envelope, so don't need to mess with this right now. So first thing I'm going to do is pick my root bass note that I want to use, so we'll just go with that one. And then hold, sync, D sharp, and then F twice, and then now we have opted out of local mode, so we have local mode off now. So next thing that we're going to do is hook up our oscillators to the MidiVolts. So I'm going to do V0 pitch to pitch in on 1, V1 pitch to pitch in on oscillator 2, and then let's go ahead and hook up oscillator 3 as well. So we'll do V2 pitch on the rate in on the modulation section. Now we're going to do one thing a little bit different than how we would normally hook this up. Before we would route the LFO to the noise section, but we're actually going to change a few things to make it easier for us a little later. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to send the wave out on oscillator 1 and 2 to the utility section. And then from here, we're going to route this back. So once again, utilities, mult, to the oscillator 1 in on the mixer. So basically what we just did is we're taking both of these oscillators, we're combining them, we're mixing them passively, and then we're going to use basically the oscillator 1 knob to control its volume. So on the MidiVolts, I have it set to unison, and so up on the A and then on the unison section. And then let's just first get these 2 oscillators tuned. Let's go to drone. Okay, cool, close enough. And now let's go ahead and hook up our LFO. So we have V2 pitch in, and then we're gonna go wave out of the modulation section. This time, instead of going into noise in, we're actually gonna go to oscillator 2 in. So now the modulation section oscillator will be controlled by this one. So let's get this all in tune now. A lot of times I do that, like sometimes I can't hear the octave differences, so I'll turn both knobs down and listen. Are they the same octave or are they not? So I think we're good. Okay, cool. So that's the one little bit of difference on how we're going to route things. But from here, we can start working on the most difficult part, which is actually getting the filter as an oscillator. So the first thing we need to do is we need to disconnect the filter from the oscillators. So normally the oscillators are normalized into the filter, and then from there we're going to the VCA. So we're going to disconnect that. So the way you do that is you just get just a cable and it doesn't need to be plugged in anything other than this one input. So now if I go to drone, there's no sound, and the reason why is because this connection was broken. So just so you guys know. So that's going to disconnect it from there. So now, well, how do we get our output back to the VCA? Well, we can just route it there. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to go to the output of the mixer section into the VCA in. Okay, cool. So that's working. Okay, so now the part that took me a while to figure out. So basically what we need to do is we're going to treat this as an oscillator and we're going to bring it back into the mixer. So the first thing we need to do is basically set up our filter so that it is acting as an oscillator. And then the way you do that is you crank your resonance. So we're going to go resonance all the way up. And then we are going to take the output. Let's do this one here. We're going to go output into the noise end on the mixer section. So I'm going to turn these both down and let's just see if we can hear the sine wave that's generated from our filter. Okay, cool. That looks like it's working. So now the filter oscillator will be controlled by this noise end because that's where we're routing it. So that's great. So now what we need to do is actually send 1 volt per octave voltages into here in order to control it. So what you have to do, because the cutoff input is not going to work just going straight 1 volt per octave to here, you have to scale it first. And then the way you do that is by sending it into an attenuator. So we're going to go pitch out of V2, so that's our 4th voice. We're going to the input of the attenuator, and then from there we're going to go output to the cutoff end. So let's see if this reaches. Okay, cool. So now if I play, we should hear basically the filter played at 1 volt per octave. Okay, so this part will take a while to get right. So what you have to do is you have to play around with the attenuator until you find the correct scaling. It is probably close to what mine is if I had to guess, but it might not be. I'm not sure. So just by tweaking this, keep playing around with it until you can find that proper scaling across the range. That's not perfect, but I mean, it's going to be close enough for what we're trying to do. You could use your ear, but once again, if you use a tuner, you could probably get it really close. Okay, so now that the filter is hooked up into our mixer section, so now what we can do is start mixing everything together and first tuning and then ultimately getting to create some chords. So let's do that part next. So I'm going to turn this one down. Now oscillator 1 and 2, which oscillator 1 being these two combined, and then oscillator 2 now being the modulation section voice, those should already be pretty well in tune. So now what we need to do is tune the filter. So I'm going to turn this up. So that sounds pretty close. Another point at this step, what I would do is probably change your waveforms too, because the sawtooth is super buzzy. It's going to be a little bit difficult to hear the sine wave that's coming out of the filter. So what I found is I would just go ahead and switch these to triangle wave now. And then on the modulation section, I would switch this to a sine just to make it sound a little bit more even, because unfortunately we're only going to be able to get a sine wave out of the filter. So let's do that. Okay, I think that sounds pretty close. Okay, so now that we have the filter tuned with the other oscillators and the filter is scaled properly, now we can go ahead and send in the gate from V0 into the trigger in, which will then ultimately control the keyboard release mode. So now we should be able to, well, we got to switch to Poly 4 and down on B. Now we should be able to play some chords. So you kind of get the idea. It's very limited, but still, it's kind of cool just to try to get it to work and just see how it works on your system. So anyways, that's what I wanted to show you guys. Feel free to try it. Let me know if it works or not. Once again, it does take quite a while, especially this step with rescaling the voltage coming from the MidiVolts desktop prior to going into the filter. So just pay close attention here. Make sure you get that right. I think I'm going to end the video with another friend of mine that got this working on his system. That's a much better player than I am, so you guys can hear what it sounds like when actually, you know, a proper keyboard player is actually using it. So I appreciate your time. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks.